In this video, we will look at two new truck terminals that opened in 1929. Both were the most modern at the time and located in large cities that were seeing the phenomenal growth of the trucking industry. At that period of time, trucks were a lot smaller than now, with trailers barely 20 feet in length. There was no need for gigantic parking areas. A lot of the buildings resembled multi-story storage warehouses with a truck loading platform on ground level. An illustration of this type of terminal can be seen in this new facility for Liberty Highway Company, one of the two that had just opened. This one was in Detroit, Michigan. Its size was 24,000 square feet. The other new one was in Cleveland, Ohio, and was half that size. Liberty Highway was headquartered in Toledo, Ohio, and owned a terminal in Fremont, Ohio. Leased locations included Jackson, Michigan, Elyria, Ohio, and Sandusky, Ohio. To build the two new facilities, Liberty Highway spent $160,000. A little history about the company would be helpful. Formed in 1918, the first year they transported 15 million pounds of freight and generated revenues of $96,000. 10 years later, in 1928, they hauled 280 million pounds of freight and revenues shot up to over $1 million. In 1929, the number of trucks and trailers in the fleet was 145. Truly a regional motor carrier, Liberty Highway served points in northern Ohio, southeastern Michigan, and Chicago. Here is a photo of Frank C. Smith, president and general manager of both Liberty Highway Company and Liberty Motor Freight Company. Yes, he ran both companies at the time, which wasn't too unusual for that time period for one man to run more than one trucking company. While we are looking at new terminals opened in 1929, let's go to Chicago, Illinois. This is the Chicago Motor Express Terminal at 361 West Illinois Street. I've talked about multi-tenant truck terminals on this channel before, like the one elsewhere in Chicago a few years later at 3333 South Iron Street. That one was a huge 100-door terminal and for many years had Denver Chicago Trucking Company as a tenant. You may also remember the ones I spoke about in Indianapolis, Indiana, and Los Angeles, California. If you missed those videos, I'll put a link to them at the end of this video. The Chicago Motor Express space was used by 36 trucking companies who paid a monthly fee for the benefit of using a centralized traffic department. That eliminated the need for each truck line to have a salesman soliciting business. Here's how having one traffic department worked for the 36 truck lines sharing the terminal. A shipper would call in using a single phone number to tell the traffic department the details of a shipment to be picked up. That information was probably as little as the number of boxes to be picked up, the total weight, and the name and address of the destination. The traffic department would know which of the truck lines had the routes and would direct the shipment to the company serving that destination. In 1929, trucking companies were regulated by the individual states for both intrastate and interstate authority. The Interstate Commerce Commission would not begin regulating motor carriers until 1935. With that in mind, a shipper would need to rely on several carriers depending on what direction and how far the trucking companies went into adjoining states. I wish to be able to provide the names of the 36 trucking companies that used the Chicago Motor Express Terminal. The only phone number would have been for the traffic department with no need for phone numbers for the individual companies. It would have been the same setup for the other multi-tenant truck terminals elsewhere in the country. When the one in Indianapolis, Indiana opened, there was a newspaper advertisement with the names of all the carriers using that facility. Let's move to another area and another terminal. In Green Bay, Wisconsin, the plan of having a motor freight terminal where all merchandise to be transported by common carriers could be assembled in one place. The idea came from the Green Bay Chamber of Commerce. In 1929, Green Bay had a population of around 40,000 and was one of the largest wholesale distributing centers in Wisconsin. 12 trucking companies were operating in that city in 1919. Back then, they had unique methods of picking up freight from the many wholesale businesses. They would drive from one to another, collecting a small shipment or a single box, and move on to the next pickup location. When several trucks arrived at one location at about the same time, it would create congestion with trucks parking on the street, awaiting their turn at the dock. The congestion on the streets of Green Bay, Wisconsin was noticed by the Chamber of Commerce, who called upon the owners of the trucking companies to come up with a plan to eliminate the crisscrossing of the city by the trucks. The result was the creation of the terminal of Northern Transportation Company, along with major changes. The shippers would deliver all freight to the terminal with their own trucks. Dock workers would sort the freight to the spaces set aside for each of the inner-city haulers. 12 trucking companies used that terminal, with the largest of the common carriers going only 70 miles. Northern Transportation Company used the terminal as well, with another terminal in Milwaukee and a new one being constructed in Oshkosh, Wisconsin. Another multi-tenant trucking terminal opened in February 1931. This is a full-page advertisement from the Dayton Daily News. Among the motor carriers that had initially used the terminal were General Motor Transportation Company, Wagner Highway Transportation Company, Riss-Miller Transportation Company, and Liberty Highway Company. Yes, the same company mentioned earlier in this video. In the ad, it said Liberty operated through this Dayton terminal to Indianapolis, Chicago, and Detroit. Here is an aerial photo of the Chicago truck terminal that I talked about earlier at 3333 South Iron Street. I hope you have enjoyed learning about some of the older truck terminals early in trucking history. I like finding out about the early carriers that helped create the industry. There is so much history from the 1920s and 1930s that needs to be remembered, along with newer history. If you enjoy these videos, I hope you will subscribe to the channel. As of this video, there are almost 600 subscribers. My goal is to have 1,000. So hit that subscribe button and tell your friends about this channel too. Your comments are appreciated, and I'll try to answer as many of them as possible. Future videos will include early histories of Keishan Motor Express Terminal, Riss & Company, and Transportation Incorporated, plus more old trucking company advertising from trade magazines and telephone directories. Let me know what you would like to see in the comments. I have not forgotten a request from one of my viewers about a history of Bowman Transportation. I'm working on that one. Thanks for watching, and I'll show you more history very soon.